What's up? What's up? Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of Collectivitis podcast, the podcast where we dissect the disease that is collectivism. My name's Pietro. This is my co-host, Max, and we're pretty excited to be here. Wouldn't you say that, Max?
Great to be here, Pietro, and thank you for inviting me to co-host Collectivitis with you. I think
no problem.
This could be a great podcast. Up there with Joe Rogan. We'll take over the #1 ranking on Spotify.
Aim high, and you can only be disappointed. Well, I mean, I figured, Max, you turned 27 last week, and I've been 27 for a while. So the natural urge to start a podcast was was getting the better of me.
Exactly. Well, I think it hits most people when they turn 30, so we're a little bit ahead of the curve.
When they turn 30, see, I thought 30 was smoking meats. By 30, you start smoking meats, and your window to start a podcast is over. But if you've got one going by 30, you can keep it cranking. So
I think we can simultaneously podcast and smoke meats.
Well, if that's all I'm doing, that's a hell of a lifestyle, podcasting and smoking meats. But anyway, let's talk about why we are excited, because I think we've got a bit of a niche here. We've got a bit of a niche market on what we like to talk about. People talk about movies on their podcast. They talk about TV shows. They talk about there's heaps of girls talking about like their sex lives and stuff. And I have no idea about any of those three. But what I do know a little bit about is Australian politics and libertarianism broadly. We're both staunch libertarians. We're both quite involved in Australian politics, and certainly interested in politics abroad. And so that's like, I mean, I've found that there's definitely a gap in the market for that here. I'm always following really good podcasters in the US. I mean, Dave Smith does Part of the Problem. I'm a huge fan of that. Michael Malice does You're Welcome. I follow a bit of Timcast. I follow Tom Woods, also is fantastic. So they're sort of spoilt for choice there, and they're always talking about kind of US issues and global issues as well. But there's loads to talk about here. The last 2 years have really highlighted a gap for libertarians in Australia to talk about libertarianism. Like, there's never been a more oppressive state than in these last 2 years. And there's a couple of personalities. There's a couple of, like, Topher Field did Battleground Melbourne, which some of you may know about. There's Matt Wong on Discernibles, is certainly libertarian leaning, but there's not a lot of other independent media podcasters here in Australia. So I figured, why not? Let's give it a whirl. I definitely don't know much about anything else, and I do know a lot about this. So let's
like you said, in America, the spoilt for choice. They've got plenty of libertarian podcasts. We've got a few that maybe lean that direction, but I think they like to toe the line a little bit, just to not alienate plenty of people. So yeah, like you said, there's a gap in the market for an Australian libertarian podcast. There is, we can touch on a lot of Australian topics. Mostly I listen to Dave Smith, listen to a little bit of Timcast as well. So libertarian broadly, there's plenty of things that we can resonate with, but it would be great to touch on the more directly Australian topics.
Yeah, for sure. And there's not a lot of I know the US has like a really ardent kind of libertarian culture, because the US, when it was founded, like the US in 1776 is the most libertarian a country has ever been. It's often like a straw man argument against libertarians is like, all right, well, when have you ever had a country that's been run by libertarianism? Right. Okay. The US, when it was at its most prosperous, or just before it was at its most prosperous. And then the more statist it got, the worse it got for the US. But at the start, like so there's that culture there. That's kind of, I think, why the US has a lot of personalities that are interested in this kind of thing. Australia doesn't have that culture, which is why, people are awake now. They know, okay, something's wrong. The state is way overpowering every aspect of my life, and they can feel that instinctively, but they don't know where to go to find these answers. And I mean, not to sound egotistical, but we have these answers, and it's not me who came up with them. It was Murray Rothbard, and it was Ludwig von Mises and Hayek, and all these other like great people of the past who have written the answers. That Frederick Bastiat, Ron Paul's been talking about it for the last 40 years. The answers to all the problems that we're seeing, they already exist. And I think maybe if we can reach a couple of people, and if we can be the voice for a couple of people to figure out that's the direction, that what's wrong here, the boogeyman we're looking for here is the state.
Yep.
Then look, job done. And if not, then I've made a cool podcast, and my mum and your mum have tuned in and complained about how much swearing we've put in. I don't know how much
I'm actually amazed we haven't dropped any F-bombs yet.
Do you want to drop the first one? Do you want to do the others?
We'll save it. Have it in context. We'll make it passionate.
Yeah, we want it to occur naturally. Cool.
Well, like you're saying, I think, sorry to interrupt, I think a lot of people would actually resonate with libertarianism if they were more aware of the values and principles, but they just live in their little bubbles. So yeah, if we can achieve the mission of spreading the word of libertarianism a little bit, I think we've done our job.
Yeah, they live in their little bubble, and there's the whole 24/7 news media cycle is hand in hand with the state, and it's state propaganda. And I mean, every time you open even social media, like there's government ads. Like, who do you think pays for that? That's all taxpayer funded in the end anyway. Like, it's constant. It's this bubble that it's not their fault. They don't know why the state is to blame for all these things. The state's constantly justifying its own existence.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, it's a noble idea, I'd say, to try and wake a few people up. So let's follow it. Let's see where it goes. I'm excited about it. But what I'm really quite excited about is the fact that we are quite involved in politics. We're both quite involved with the Liberal Democrats, which are the Libertarian Party here in Australia. So we're keen to get some people who know more than us, have different insights to us. Candidates, political commentators. They don't have to necessarily just be Liberal Democrats. We'd like to hear from heaps of other liberty-minded people. So that's kind of the scope of what we're trying to do with this. We'd like to talk to people who have something to say, have something interesting to add to the conversation about libertarianism and the unique position that is libertarianism in Australia, which I would say is largely in its infancy. It's just now learning how important it is to have individual rights, and how kind of far back we are in defending these, so far back that can we even push back to the point that the US or wherever else has been fighting for. So that's kind of I think what we'd like to do with this. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that. Yeah, it's a very slippery slope, and it's on a currently very steep decline for how much power the state has. So yeah, a little bit of pushback would be good. We can try and level that slope down a little bit. That'd be great if we could flatten the curve, if you will. And our
if ever
voting...
there's a sentence that's been tainted, flatten the curve of government interfering in people's lives. That's something I want to see.
Absolutely. And fortunately in Australia, our voting system is a lot friendlier to achieving the election of libertarians, or any minor party for that matter. The way it works, there's definite chance that we can get more people elected this upcoming state election, next federal election in 3 years, and hopefully in whether it be 10, 15, 20 years, there is a much, much bigger libertarian presence in state and federal government for Australia.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the strategy has to be different here to what they do in the US. In the US, I mean, because of the whole first past the post thing, you have to win to get an elected libertarian, right? So the most they can hope for is to get that 15% or whatever it is to get on the debates and to have more. So it's a sort of long-term grind here, because of the fact that in Victoria, in our upper house, we have 2 currently elected libertarians, just because of the way the system works. You don't need 15. You don't need a majority. You don't need 51%. They got elected on like less than 5%. So I mean, the strategy is different. We kind of, instead of trying to grow that, we've been trying to use our people who are elected to grow the message, and that's certainly been successful in the last 2 years, and would be great to add to those voices, even if we're not elected. I dare say neither of us are going to be elected anytime soon. Do you reckon you're electable, Max? Do you reckon you've done anything that makes you unelectable already?
Geez, nothing. Well, I've got no criminal bloody history, but I don't know. If people don't push back against the state enough, who knows?
That's the aim. The aim of this podcast is to make sure that neither of us are electable because we simply would not be allowed to run. That's the actual aim that we've got here. So I reckon that's pretty easily achievable. Just a couple of, no, I won't even go into what it would take to get it done in the first episode. There's no point if I say something ridiculous and get me blacklisted in the first episode. We'll wait until it's a little bit bigger at least.
Censored after 50% of our first episode, just podcast gone.
Yeah, that's right. We'll make it a season finale. Pietro turns himself unelectable by saying horrific thing about what he wants to do to government buildings. We'll leave it at that. Well, that's just a bit of bit of anticipation for you guys. Cool. I think that about. Oh no. Well, who are we? Who are you, Max? What makes you a libertarian? Tell me a bit more.
So may as well just run off a quick little recent history of myself, why I'm libertarian. I've always been quite politically minded growing up. Come from a family of quite politically active people. So going through my teenage years, I started becoming more and more disillusioned with the major parties, felt a bit politically homeless. So I reckon once I hit 18, 19, I sort of stopped caring. I was caring too much, and you end up going nowhere because you can't achieve anything. That was the mindset back then, was that I don't know who I am. This is killing me. I'm going to forget about politics, just live my life in my own little bubble. And then
that's pretty libertarian.
Well, true.
To be honest.
Well, I didn't know what libertarianism was back then. And then, of course, the atrocities of the last 3 years with the pandemic coming into our lives.
So did you know what libertarianism was prior to the last 3 years, or did you learn it?
I knew roughly what it was, but I couldn't have run off and told you all the values and the principles like I could now. So then, over the last 3 years, I start thinking, geez, why is the government taking over my life? Like, I don't care. I want to do the right thing by myself, which is generally a responsible thing across all of society, but couldn't do that without having daddy government poking you with a stick, telling you where to go, what to do. So that opened my mind a little bit more. And then through chance and luck and connections of friends, they led me to the Liberal Democrats, Victoria. Went to a branch meeting, and that first branch meeting, I remember being really blown away. And I was like, wow, I'm super impressed with this. I didn't actually realize how much my values and principles aligned and resonated with libertarianism. And I think once you learn that, it's quite hard to go back on, because it's not just, it's not certain topics, like if you're left or right, there's certain topics that would just divide you constantly. It's a way of life. It's outside of politics. It's the way you live your life. And there's a few of the big principles that David Limbrick touches on quite often, which is the non-aggression principle, which is basically do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt anyone. And that can be extended past physical violence to basically do whatever you want as long as it doesn't negatively impact anyone in an unfair manner. And that's probably the biggest principle I've always lived my life by. So once I sort of learned all that, made a lot of connections, sort of found a home amongst libertarians.
Yeah, look, it's interesting because there's this kind of stereotype, and we're probably guilty of perpetuating it. Like, we like to be a bit edgy, and as libertarians, guns, drugs, whatever. Like, we're these kind of, but in reality, as you said, like the non-aggression principle and the the life, liberty, property, as long as you don't infringe on anyone else's, you have the right to do it. Like, it's the most moral philosophy, ideology that exists. It's the most natural when it comes to your natural rights, and it's the only way that you could see a society or a country being governed, or not even governed, being ordered, being organized, that would actually be moral, and no one would be left in a position of subjugation to someone else. So there's this. It's interesting because as I said, I'm guilty of it myself, but we do have to dispel this myth, because libertarianism is the most beautiful thing I've ever encountered.
Exactly.
I can't speak its praises enough. So that's why we're here, not to get ourselves expelled from ever being members of parliament. But
so on that, why don't you go into how you found libertarianism? I know you've been a libertarian for a lot longer than I have. Well, I think I've been a libertarian for most of my life, but not actually realized it. And I know you realized it a lot sooner than I did. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have been libertarians all along. They just didn't know what to call it. I think that's probably more accurate. I was certainly right-leaning when I was younger. I liked arguing with my teachers in school because they were horrible, horrific lefties. I always knew I didn't like the left for various reasons. But then when I was 21, I read Anatomy of the State by Murray Rothbard, who I mentioned before. And it's one of those moments where you kind of can't look at the world the same way after having read that. It's ordered. It's telling you everything that you have already observed about the world, but explaining it in a manner that shows you just how blatantly and obviously the government or the state is working against the interests of everyone, of all people, and everyone should be outraged by this. And you kind of come away from it thinking, not only can I never look at the world the same way, but I have to tell everyone. I have to, explain that the world's fucked. The world's fucked, and you need to know. And there it is. It was organic, that F-bomb. I was talking about.
It was, wasn't it? There we are, the first one. We dropped the first one. The first of many, I might add.
The first two. Anyway, so from then on, I was kind of in my circles. They were always very lefty friends and lefty circles. So it wasn't until the last 2 years that I really started seeking out, through the Liberal Democrats and through other friends that I knew, seeking out people who thought the same way and who looked at the world the same way. And it's been thrilling. So if we can add to that number, that would certainly fill my heart with joy. That's
not many things fill your heart with joy. So if we could get one thing, then
no, my cold black heart is very no, that's not true. Cool. I think that about wraps it up. I mean, obviously sometimes it's just going to be you and I chatting about things that are happening. Sometimes hopefully most of the time we'll have someone on that we can poke their brain a little bit and ask some interesting questions and get some interesting responses. But I think that about wraps it up for an intro episode. So Absolutely. If you are still here, thanks for listening to the rambling and the rambling. There wasn't much else really. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully it'll certainly be a lot more enjoyable as the time moves on. All right. Thank you very much. Once again, this is Collectivitis. If you didn't get the joke, it's like collectivism is a virus. That's the last time I'm going to explain it. Anyway, all good. I'll shut up now. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, Pietro. Look forward to more episodes.
Sounds good. All right. Catch you later.
Bye.